right, all right, all right. Oh, I forgot to get a drink before I jumped on. That's cool. We'll figure it out, I guess, as we go. So, wanted to start off here. We are going to be talking tonight with Jaron Myers, comedian, YouTube, video maker, podcast extraordinaire, Prime, Amazon Prime. He's got a movie on there. So, we are going to be talking to Jaron Myers tonight, and then next week, I think we're talking to, I think it's next week, we're talking to Petty Christian Memes, and then the week after that, we're talking to Pastor Humor. So, tonight, though, we're talking to Jaron Myers. When he gets on here, we'll add him on. But it should be a really interesting conversation, because if you've ever heard his podcasts specifically, or any podcasts or interviews he's been on, he's not just the comedy. Like, he's a very multifaceted individual. Really appreciate his podcast in general. Here we go. And so hopefully you've seen that. If not, we'll talk a little bit about his podcast as he has. He has a couple of them. One of them, we'll talk about him. I don't want to give anything away. And he'll be jumping on here in a minute. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. As we're kind of killing time here before he jumps on, we've been doing these interviews now for like 2 months. And we've got them kind of archived, because obviously Instagram doesn't keep them. But we've got them archived, and whenever we're done with them, here we go. They're archived. Oh, come on, Instagram. Don't be that way. Instagram's going to be doing me that way again. Here we go. We're going to add, and then he'll jump on, and we'll start this interview. And if you hear my dogs, it's because they're barking and they're crazy. So just ignore that. Hey!
What's going on, dude?
Not a lot. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for jumping on here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. What is it with guys named Michael who run youth meme accounts?
I don't know. Apparently it's a trend.
That is the thing, it seems. So I'm just getting comfy on this. I'm in Los Angeles. Can you tell there's a plant hanging behind me, and there's good lighting everywhere?
There's good lighting all the time.
Yeah.
From what I understand in LA. Does it ever rain? Does it ever rain?
This good lighting takes you from an 8 to a 9 real fast.
Real
I think
fast.
I'm an 8. Did you hear how confident I called myself an 8? There we go. All right.
Hey, I was expecting you to go all the way to a 10. Like, I'm an LA 10.
No,
you're
dude,
gonna go,
no.
You're going to go down.
I'm not
it goes
10,
the other
dude.
way? Is that how it goes?
Have you seen the people? Dude, I look like an old Navy mannequin that found a golden corral. That's what are you talking about? I'm not an LA 10.
So I'm a Midwest 8 and an LA 4. Is that kind of how that works? Okay.
So that adds up to a 12, bro. You're killing it.
Anyway, man, thank you for jumping on. I appreciate it, man. I've been looking forward to this. Kind of in prep a little bit. I've been listening to, well, I don't want to go too far because I've been super busy this week, but I've listened to a couple of your podcasts that you have. They Don't Bite. And then obviously I've seen clips of your other one, the Things I Learned
Last Night? Yeah.
So it's just you have so much. That's why I wanted to talk to you. You have so many different facets that you put out there of comedy and seriousness. And I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit with you tonight. So
sure.
Anyway, thank you for jumping on again.
Yeah.
For the 5th time, I see that. But so let's get a little bit of background for those of you, for those that are watching that may not, somehow they've missed you on the internet. Don't know how that happened, but if they have, give them a little bit of background about kind of who you are and how you really fast track about how you got kind of where you're at now.
Right. Well, the thing I'm probably most notable for in the Christian community is a Chick-fil-A rap video. And we made that in 2017. And that was 2017 was honestly the first year that I felt like I was like, oh yeah, I'm like a comedian. Like I'm doing this for like my full-time thing. And so my goal was to get a video to go over 1 million views. And then we set a car on fire for this music video. So I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is it. And so I put that out, and within a few days we were pushing 30 million views on that. And now I think we're like just over 70 million views across like multiple platforms. So that's insane to me.
That's crazy.
And so I think that's where a lot of people first found out about me, was this Chick-fil-A. A lot of people call me the Chick-fil-A guy because they don't know my name. And so I'll see in comments, people like, oh, is that the Chick-fil-A guy? And also for like a solid year after that video, and still a lot of times now, but I can't walk into any Chick-fil-A without the employees like side-eyeing me, they're like, wait a minute, that's the,
That might be.
so that's pretty, it's pretty wild. And then, the second time that I got like national, like attention was the graduation prank I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I snuck into a college graduation. So that like got shared virally, and by a bunch of meme accounts, by, like BuzzFeed included me in a few articles, that kind of stuff. So, those are like the big things,
Mm-hmm.
and I've just been, like you said, we put out a lot of content. I've been doing stuff every
Yeah.
day for, since 2014. So 5 years now. And so, yeah, it's been fun, man.
Well, that's one of the things I was listening to another podcast you were on. I didn't realize you had been doing this so long. Like even before the Chick-fil-A rap thing. Like that's where I had seen you and found you. And I think a lot of people, and that's a lot of comedians' journey, I think, even musicians, artists in general, that people assume that, oh, well, that was his first hit. But when did you like start kind of doing it? I mean, just to give people perspective.
That's something that a lot of people do think, as if one day we were just like, oh, let's make a video, and then I've just launched a career out of it. That is not a lot of people miss the part of this where I was living in a van, basically. And I drove out to Colorado one time and performed for 6 people at a youth group. And I got paid in burritos. And so
that's hustle. That is hustle right there.
Yeah. Like literally no money. I put gas on a credit card that I still am paying off. And, and so, I flunked out of college in 2013, where, well, I went to a Christian college. You don't really flunk out of Christian college.
The Lord calls you somewhere else.
Right. They sit you down and they go, you should take a semester and see what God has for you. That's like that's like what they do. And so, I flunked out of college. And I started leading worship at churches. Like it was a Christian college, so I told my friends, like, hey, tell your churches that I'll come lead worship. I was working at Subway and leading worship at churches. And when I was in college, I did the talent shows, and I wrote some dumb, funny songs. Like I wrote one called "I Found My Girl on Craigslist." I wrote one about my girlfriend being a Sasquatch. Just dumb, silly stuff,
Classy stuff.
And, right. And so I didn't think of it like as a career type thing. But my friends started telling their churches, they were like, hey, this guy can come lead worship. Also, he did these funny songs. We were in college. So I had a few churches call and say, hey, would you be willing to come do those funny songs for like our Valentine's banquet? And I was like, sure. Okay. So I did that. And then like a month later, another church called. And then a month after that, another church called. And then I was doing one like almost every week when it came to fall. And I was like, oh, I think this is like a viable, and they just wanted the funny songs. Like they didn't want me to do. And I was like, okay. And so I started telling jokes in between. I started studying stand-up, and then I just like really dove into it, and I really started investing in it. I would say 2015 is when I decided that I was like, I changed everything on the website to just say comedian, and just started really going for it. I started going to open mics almost every night, started getting a lot better at stand-up. I started finding mentors, people who were doing it full time, asking them how to get good at it, and just really started to. I hate the word hustle, but that's what I was doing.
It's a buzzword.
I had I bought a clunker van for $2,000 and was just driving. If you wanted me at your youth group in Atlanta, I would drive from Missouri to Atlanta. I'd make the 9.5 hour drive for $100, and a couch to sleep on. And so, I was just doing anything and everything until I could make it. And then I started flying more in 2017, started flying to some gigs. And then that Chick-fil-A rap happened. And I wouldn't say almost overnight, but things definitely changed after that. People
more exposure,
took notice. Yeah. And then I was pretty strategic with social media in that, I grew my social media last year. So you said you followed since the Chick-fil-A rap?
Yeah.
So did you see the time where I did the whole I hate Arby's thing?
Yes. I was there for the Arby's thing. Yes.
Okay. So I used that I hate Arby's thing to jump my social media on Instagram from 2,000 followers to 10,000.
Yeah.
And I did that in a few months. And
you grew pretty fast within the last couple of years, I've seen.
Yeah, that was the thing that I just became more strategic about it. Before I was like, oh, I'm just using social media to I do shows. But then I really started being more strategic, putting more content out, putting good content out instead of just putting stuff out every day, making sure that I had good stuff going out. And I think that's changed the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's great advice there for anybody that is watching that's interested in that, because, I mean, I don't think people realize how much time people like you and other entertainers invest in all that background work to just get good, like to kind of hone the craft a little bit. Like I've listened to quite a few comedians that are like, I mean, they'll go through a ton of jokes that are bad just to get a good hour set that's decent, and then they'll hone that down, and that takes a year by itself. I mean, from what I'm talking to people. So
because people don't see the sets where, like, man, I was going to comedy clubs and doing the open mic where you get 3 minutes, and so I would be sitting there watching 20 other comedians perform for an hour, and then by the time I get on stage, there's only 3 other people in the audience, and they're also comedians, you know, and so you're going up and trying jokes for people who aren't there to laugh, and so you're just bombing. You're just up there trying to be funny, and nothing. It's like, man, people don't see the hours that I drove 3 hours for one open mic one time. I was doing that. There was one, I lived in Springfield. There was an open mic. It was on Tuesday nights in Kansas City, which is 3 hours away. And I was driving every Tuesday, 3 hours up to go to open mic.
Wow.
And so, and I did that for like 6 months, you know? And so people don't see that, you know?
No, good deal. So one of the things that you mentioned, so I think on your site I saw this, or I've seen it somewhere, that you define yourself specifically as not your typical Christian comedian. So, and I think a lot of your background, like just what we've already heard, kind of shows kind of the development in that. But why would you? Why do you choose those terms specifically instead of, I mean, just Christian comedian, or just not including that at all, maybe?
Well, okay. So the example I use is a very talented hero of a comic, Tim Hawkins. That guy is hilarious. Like, he's one of my favorite comics. The guy's brilliant. But if you're not a Christian and you go to that show, there's a lot of inside lingo. There's a lot of, you know, and that's like that. There is a place for that. That's his niche, and he is crushing it, you know? But there's a lot of inside lingo that if I brought a friend that didn't go to church to this comedy show, that's designed for church people, then they're going to feel even more like an outsider. Yeah. So my hope is to be an act that you can bring to your church or to your community that is still accessible to people who aren't of faith, or like a lot of my friends that I have, they don't even know the story of the Bible. Like, they get the Jesus part, they know that, because that's pretty common knowledge.
Everybody
but they
knows
don't know
that,
right, but they don't know the story of Jonah. You know, they don't know these Bible stories that, or even some of our insight, like they don't know what VeggieTales is, you know? And so, so my hope is that they can come to this show and it can be an opportunity where we are all coming together. Because I think that laughter is inherently vulnerable. Like, you're not going to let somebody hear you snort laugh and then also try to be the tough, like, no emotions person, you know? And so I think that laughter has that power to bring us together, and I hope that my show is an opportunity to bridge that gap and be accessible. I just want to be funny to everybody. And so I want to be able to do this in clubs or in venues that aren't churches. Like, I want a church to book me and then rent out that restaurant in their town that has a stage, and we do a show there, you know? And so it's just a comedian, not Christian comedian Jaron Myers coming, but like, hey, this is a really funny show that you're going to love. And hopefully it's an opportunity that I can help facilitate the start of a conversation that when I leave, you can continue it.
Yeah. So that was going to be the follow-up as you're talking there. So it would almost seem, I think, I mean, for me, and I'd like your opinion on this, but labels, they really hinder the conversation so much, whereas comedy, I found, I mean, even through memes, really opens up, it's vulnerable enough that it opens up a discussion that anybody can join in. To where, I mean, if you are labeling it as specifically Christian, inherently some people are going to just automatically back away from that. So, I mean, what are your just impressions on labels in general? I mean, helpful, not helpful?
Well, we can talk about the Christian label specifically, especially in our post-Christian culture, where in the 50s, after World War II, I think it was some over 80% of households were in church regularly. You know, they were in church every Sunday. That was just part of the culture. And so now we're seeing the grandchildren of that generation, right? Who they were taking their kids to church, and those kids grew up, those kids gave birth to us. And now we're sitting here feeling the third generation away from people who were in church every Sunday, but still drinking a lot at home and not instilling those values in the home place. Not everybody was doing that, but a lot of people, it had become a cultural thing to go to church rather than something that was instilled in the home value system. So now you've got a lot of people who the word Christian to them comes with a lot of baggage. And even the idea of going to church, a lot of my friends that I talk to, they go, oh, I went with my grandma, or I did this. But because it wasn't instilled at home and in the individual everyday practice of life, there's a lot of people who, not that they have a bad taste of that term, but just have a, it's just, you go to church and you do the thing. Yeah. And so I think that in a culture that, and also there's a lot of, our country's founded on this Christian stuff or whatever. So there's this idea that American equals Christian, which is also an entirely different conversation. Yeah,
but it's a much longer discussion.
Right. But what I'm saying is that there are people who, for them, Christian means something that is different than the story told in the Bible. Yeah. And so that is something that I don't think is hurtful. Like, I have started to say that I'm a Jesus follower. Like if I meet people like at a coffee shop or whatever, I just go, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, or I'm a Jesus follower, or I not that I'm avoiding the word Christian, but I just choose to use something different.
Well, it seems like it would hone it in a whole lot more specifically.
Right. Like, oh, I practice the way of Jesus. And I think it feels more specific, and it feels like it kind of subverts that cultural baggage that may come with
everything
that.
Connected
especially to it. Yeah, especially in the Midwest, because in cities like where I'm in Los Angeles right now, where there's not a lot of people going to church here because it's the expected thing to do. Yeah. If you're going to church here, like, you're usually integrated into the church culture, And so, but in the Midwest, it's still kind of a cultural thing. It's still almost expected.
Yes.
And
definitely.
So there's definitely more baggage where I live in Kansas City. So I use the term Jesus follower. But on just labels in general, my whole podcast, They Don't Bite, is about how it's very easy for us to identify with tribalism and identify with this term Christian more than we identify with Jesus. So we kind of pin ourselves against other people, and as long as you're a Christian, we're cool. And it doesn't matter what life you're living or what your friendship with me looks like or how healthy of a person you are. As long as, we're on the same Christian team, then, whatever, who cares? We're good. Everyone else is against us. And I think that They Don't Bite, the whole intention of that podcast was, hey, my friends that aren't Christians aren't spooky goblins with teeth. Like, they're not out to get us. They're not, like, I still have healthy friendships with people who believe different things than me, or maybe disagree with me theologically. And how are we supposed to engage in those conversations and have those relationships if I'm going to vilify those people? And then also, if I vilify them and then they choose Jesus, now I'm supposed to celebrate them? Doesn't add up.
So I wanted to dig in a little bit to that podcast, because I found, like I said, I only listened to one show. I wanted to listen to more, but what I found helpful is that
they're long episodes.
They are as well, and I really like that long form conversation to it. I mean, I love most of the podcasts I listen to are like that long form kind of Joe Rogan, your kind of like hour long stuff. It's very helpful, I think, to not just cut it up so much. But so that idea. What were you going through where you just sat down and go, something, I think this would be very helpful just to put out there to show that these conversations are helpful? Because the one I listened to was extremely, I have I forget who you were talking to, but I have a friend that's gay that lives in that entire lifestyle. And it's been very helpful for me to be friends with him, to see, like you said, that, yes, we disagree on a lot of things, but to communicate the fact to everybody else that, like, he's not gonna kill you. He's not gonna come after you. He's not coming after your kids. Like, this is where he's at, but you still pursue.
One thing we talk a lot about in the podcast, is that proximity changes your perspective.
Yes.
And so, you froze on me. Are we still there?
Yep, good? I'm here.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. You were just frozen on my end. We're good.
Okay.
But proximity will change your perspective in that now when we have a conversation about, so when I grew up in a small Midwest town, 5,000 people, right? I did not know a black person until I got to college.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
Like the only gay people that I had met were like the flamboyantly in your face ones. And I think that they were the ones that I knew in high school were still trying to figure that out in a small town context, you know?
Yeah.
So like,
which is
so
super difficult for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've gained a lot more respect for the individuals that did come out in my small town. But that was something that when I got into college and when I made different friends becoming an adult, what I had learned growing up didn't hold true. Right? So like all I had learned growing up was that people who weren't Christians were unsafe and they were dangerous people, and the people you can trust and rely on are Christians. And when I grew up, I realized that, honestly, a lot of the people who caused a lot of damage and hurt in my life were the Christians. And I started to have healthy friendships. So the reason this became a thing for me was because I was spending so much time in those comedy clubs. And because I was becoming friends with comedians and people who weren't in church every week. And were actually out doing comedy shows till 2 a.m. on Saturday night, you know?
Yeah.
So they weren't going to church on Sunday morning. And so I was becoming friends with all these guys and a few of these girls that, like, they were genuinely nice, caring people who our conversations were authentic and bold. You know, we would, like, they didn't care that I was a Christian. Like, I found out that, like, I was almost shy with my Christianity when I first started going to the comedy clubs. When I first started hanging out with comics, I was like, oh man, like they're going to make fun of me or they're going to say, yeah, I really would. And then like when one of them found out, they're like, oh, that's cool. Like I used to go to church. I used to be in that, but it's just not for me. And I was like, like you're not going to.
You're not going to roast me? You're not,
we're not going to debate this right now. Like you're more interested in like what I'm doing this weekend than you are. Like, and I think that that's something that we talk a lot about in my podcast as well. But like, we in our faith circles are constantly thinking about there's a God and what's he doing in this world. But I think people outside of our faith circles aren't even thinking about that. Like it's not even crossing their mind. It's not a big deal to them. So they're not sitting there. Sometimes I grew up thinking that people who weren't Christians were sitting there going like, how do we take them down? You know, and they're not doing that. And so I was spending so much time with all these friends and becoming real good friends with these people that were different than me. And we would have great conversations about faith. And I could see where they had a different understanding of the Bible than I did. And I can go, and there was, what started the podcast was there was a conversation that I had. We have an office space in Kansas City. It's a shared office space with like 50 comedians where we all pay rent each month, so it's super cheap. And we just have this space that we can go and hang out or use during the day.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really like it. And I was sitting there with a buddy who is not a Christian, and we were just having a conversation. And he said, the reason that I don't think I could believe in a God is I don't understand how a God who loves us and sees everything that can happen can allow so much hurt to happen in the world. And I was like, oh, okay. So we started talking about like where I come from theologically on that. And the viewpoint that I have that I go, I think that this hurt that you see in the world also hurts God's heart. And so like we had that conversation because he's sitting there going like, oh, this God is just allowing these things to happen. And I'm sitting here going like, oh, like we are causing these things by our sinful human nature. We're the ones causing this hurt. And it also breaks God's heart. And so we got to have that conversation. At the end of it, we left and I was like, I wish I had recorded that. Like I wish that
it was just so good.
I wish other people could see that conversation and how it was amicable. Like we sat and we just, no one was getting heated or like angry at each other. And it was just, we were having honest conversations, asking questions of each other. And we both left and even still disagreeing, but respecting and loving each other still. And I think that that's the idea of the podcast. And so I just started inviting more of my friends and we started recording it. And it's changed my life. It's been so fun.
Well, and I think, it's a good thing to have out there because, I don't know, I can't speak for your experience or anybody else's, but I know mine growing up, evangelism was specifically go talk to somebody about Jesus and like tell them about salvation. And it wasn't a, hey, have a conversation just with somebody and just talk. Because, the best conversations I've had are very similar to yours, just sitting down and really letting the other side, just speak their piece about it and say, well, I think this way or that way about a situation. And then saying, well, this is how I view it. I mean, just like what you said, just having that
Right.
open conversation and not being afraid of what, the other side, not having the answer to whatever they say or the other side's opinion on it,
Right.
and just being very vulnerable about the situation and not having to be
Yeah.
right all the time.
Right. And that's in the episode with Garrett Smalley, which is the They Don't Bite that came out last Thursday. We talked about how Christians often bond on our foundness. Like we were lost, but now we're found.
Yeah.
And how we crave to be a people who have the answers.
Yeah.
But that leaks into those conversations where suddenly, if we don't have an answer, we feel like we're supposed to. And so we get anxious and we start to twist the word of God to fit that moment or what they want to hear or what they don't want to hear. And we're actually just causing a wider division there.
Yeah. Well, and it comes off very inauthentic too, in the sense that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, it's
like they
all
can
of a
tell
sudden
you're making it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, and I've talked to other guests about this, that I mean, I think if we as Christians were a lot more authentic about it and just being like, I don't know the answer to that. I'd love to talk to you more about it. Hey, let's meet up again and talk about it. I think we'd have much better conversations.
Right.
Because it would be so much more honest, so much more authentic. And, I mean, I can respect someone a lot more if they can say, something, just be humble about it. I don't know, but hey, let's talk about it later. Other than somebody like beating you over the head with, having to be right or something. So I appreciate that podcast, the one I did hear. And just the heart behind it.
Well, and that's what following Jesus is. Following Jesus is a life of looking at things differently over and over again.
Yeah.
And I mean, and he shows that in the way that he taught. You've heard it this way, but I say this.
Yeah.
And so our whole life should be going, oh, yeah, I guess I changed my mind about that. We're so limited in our wisdom and our knowledge, but for some reason we feel like we've got to come out here with this loud trumpet of answers. But this is not our role.
No, well, and that's the thing. We just need to let God defend himself. He doesn't need me to defend him. Yeah. He'll do it plenty himself. So building on that, is there an example of maybe a show you've had, maybe even a podcast you've done or an experience that you walked away and you were just like, I never expected it to have that sort of impact? I mean, that was obviously like a wow.
Man, I've had a few of those, and it's always so incredible. But the most recent one was a few months ago. I was out in Virginia, and in my show, I talk about how when I flunked out of college, I didn't have any purpose in my life. When I was in high school and college, I had this perspective that I needed to succeed and I needed to be something, and so my identity was wrapped up in like doing the right things, being the right things, being the good Christian guy. And so whenever I flunked out of college and had to move back home, I was embarrassed. I felt like I was walking home with my tail between my legs. And I felt like, I honestly remember thinking, oh God, I'm so sorry I ruined your plan for my life. Like that's how, how was that? And so, which first of all, how arrogant to think that I could really mess that up. But
totally, you didn't see that coming.
Yeah. But like, I really felt like a failure. And so I talk about in my show, I talk about how I wanted to take my life in December of 2013 and how God met me in that moment. And he just spoke one thing to me. He said, Jaron, it is not about what you have to offer me. I just want to be with you. Like, that's it. I just want to be with you. And so I do this whole thing in my show and I talk about that and I share that. And afterward, the pastor of the church, he and his wife came up and they said, hey, we're really touched by the end of your show. Our son actually attempted suicide a few weeks ago. And we don't know how to help someone in that situation. And so like, I got to sit there for like an hour after the show and talk with this, like these, and that was one of those things to even tie into the previous conversation we just had was these are leaders of the church who are sitting down and saying like, we don't know what to do with this. And it was a moment where the Spirit just showed up and it allowed us to sit there and talk and go, hey, I'm not an expert on this by any means. I'm not a counselor. I just have, like, I just know that this is this position I was in. Here's what I was thinking then. Here's what I was feeling then. Here's what I think would have helped me. And here's what did help me eventually get out of that. And so that was one thing that I didn't know that I was going to have opportunities like that, especially obviously at that time. I didn't know I was going to do anything ever again. But yeah, it was really awesome how God orchestrated that and allowed that conversation to be something that I think was fruitful for them. So,
wow. Yeah. I mean, especially going into it specifically due to a comedy show, and then this very serious thing comes up. So that's, I mean, awesome.
Right. Well, that's what I like about my show, is that it's intentionally like that. I told you, laughing is vulnerable, right? And so, so the whole purpose of the show is that we spend 45 minutes of you getting to know me and us laughing together, because I laugh at my own jokes. And then we can have a more serious conversation where I can say, this is what I've been through. This is what I've walked through. Here's what God's speaking to me this year. And then we end on something funny. I don't do this whole laughing
end it on a
thing.
down,
Be like, hey, one time I wanted to take my life. All right, thanks for coming. Good night. No, we ended on like man, I am so joyful and have so much more fun now that I truly understand God's love for me. And so, it's given me a bunch of opportunities to speak on that, and I love it a lot.
That's awesome. All right, so if you guys are watching real quick, we are going to get to your questions here in a minute. If you have a question to submit, go ahead and do that in the question box at the bottom. But I do have one more question for you before we get into the follower question. So obviously you travel a bit as far as for your shows and stuff. So in your experience of traveling around to these different churches, different areas, what, in your opinion right now, do you think would be the biggest issue that's going to be facing the church or Christians in general that you've seen?
I think it's going to be that tribalism, especially these past few years with media and leadership, specifically in the United States. But this idea that, okay, if I agree with this ideology and then someone disagrees even slightly, that suddenly we are 100% butting heads, we're against each other. And that's just it. I think the biggest issue for churches or for Jesus followers right now is to step out of that black and white thinking, to step out of this like it's either A or B, because human emotion, human experience isn't that simple. And so we're trying to take these issues that have a lot of gray area or have a lot of room for us to disagree. And we're trying to go, okay, it's either this or not. Like, if you agree, if you think this way, whatever, you're done. And it's like, I'm so glad that that's not the way God treats us. And so, honestly, I think that we need to humble ourselves, first of all, and say, I don't have the answers. I don't know it all. But we need to be open to people who disagree with us. And we need to really examine why they disagree with us and what they're saying. I think that's something that, at least in my experience, when I grew up in youth group and in college, I think I was afraid to have questions or have doubts or or even consider opinions that were different than the ones that I held, because if I did that, then that meant that I wasn't strong and solid and fortified in what I did believe. But now I'm seeing that by not doing that, I was expressing that I was insecure in what I believe, because I'm solid in my theology. I think that, from what I've experienced of God and what I'm seeing around me and what I read in the Word, I know what I believe and I know where I stand on things. But I'm also willing to listen and hear someone out who disagrees, consider their argument, see if that matches and lines up with Scripture, and go, can I change my mind on this? Should I change my mind on this? No? Okay, but at least I walk away with a better understanding of the other person. And I think that that's something we have to be willing to do, is to step out of this, either you're totally for me and with me or totally against me, because nothing is like that. There is nothing like that. And I think that there's a lot of leaders who would love to push and say, church leaders even, will say the world is this or the world is this. And it's like, okay, let's step back, understand that we're not special or better than anybody because we choose to follow Jesus. Like, the same invitation that the Spirit of God extends to us is also extended to other people. And so I think that we need to, again, like I said earlier, it's very hard to vilify somebody, and then the moment they change their mind and agree, or the moment they become a Jesus follower, suddenly you're going to celebrate them. That doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work because they remember how you treated them when they were different.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
I
think two things you said that were really important. One, the God doesn't treat us that way thing. I think the way how you read the Bible of how God treats us and pursues us obviously is going to affect how you treat people and pursue people as well. I mean, if you know that he pursues you despite your sin and yourself, you're going to pursue people in the exact same way.
Right.
And then, like you said, going back to Scripture, I mean, knowing what Scripture says, being founded in Scripture, but being able to sit there and have a conversation with somebody with Scripture open, knowing what it says, but still hearing them out and being able to, like you said, have those doubts. I think, just going back to what you said, people are so afraid for a second to be like, well, I could be wrong. When it's just a matter of, I mean, it's one of those things that there's a case, and that's the conversation. I have a teenage daughter, and I have that conversation with her all the time. Look, I understand you're going to have doubts about that. I mean, like, if you just blindly followed this, it would be concerning because, I mean, you're going to have, I mean, the journey of faith is all of these questions. Pursuing Jesus is a bunch of these questions. So, I mean, you have to have questions in order to even get to the point where you can be solid in your faith and be like, well, this is how I got here. So, I mean, I think those 2 points are great. I mean, understanding how God pursues you is going to totally change how you pursue people. And then knowing your word is going to completely affect knowing your word is going to help you even have those conversations. Seeing that Jesus constantly had conversations with people that did not believe in him and
and I've looked at this year, I never assumed that I know exactly what the Bible meant in this specific verse. You know, we can sit here, we can discuss it. That's the point. I think when we look at Jewish culture, they had an oral teaching, and then they sat around and talked about it. And I think that that's something that maybe we've gotten away from in the way that church is set up now, is that now we go to a church service, there's a person who has a microphone, they speak for 45 minutes, and then we just go home. We don't talk about it. We don't discuss it with each other. We don't ask our questions. And we kind of look to one person to go, oh, that guy's got it, you know? And then even when in our quiet time or whatever, we go off on our own. We go to a coffee shop or in our quiet space in the house. We read and we're left to our own interpretation of the word, and we don't discuss it or talk about it with other people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing that we're missing is there was a viral post a few weeks ago from John Cooper, right? About these leaders who are walking away from faith. And he called out the guys who say things like, no one's talking about this, or no one's asking these questions. And saying, well, yeah, there are people doing that. And I just want to, I think the one thing that I was thinking about when I read that post was I don't think anyone who's saying no one's having these conversations is saying, oh, yeah, there's no YouTube videos about it or no books about this topic. They're not saying that. They're saying that in their friendships, in their friend circle, in their community, they don't have anybody who's willing to engage in those dangerous conversations, who's willing to answer the questions, or even willing to say, oh, I don't know. Because we're in a place where if you have questions and doubt, it's equated with lack of faith.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
Well, I think that, I don't know about your church growing up. I know my church growing up, it was small Midwest kind of towns too. We didn't have anything like a D group, discipleship group, small group. Again? Indiana. So we didn't have anything like that as far as, hey, we're going to have a sermon and then we're going to go, we'll have a small group this week and we'll go over through that. Or, you're going to meet and do that. Those, I think, have helped a lot. Now, again, they can be better. I mean, I made a resource specifically out of just my youth ministry days to kind of help start those questions, because I even saw in youth ministry, kids are a lot more open than adults, but they were still very hesitant to ask those questions. So when we're in youth ministry, just forced it. Here's a card. We're going to read it. And let's talk about it, because people don't say these questions. So let's force these discussions for good reason. And I think that I found that to be extremely helpful, because you can't run from that. Not if we're saying openly in this group, have these have these discussions, ask these questions, because I'm sure. I went from church into college, and that was night and day. It was, we don't ask questions to everybody and their brother is now asking questions and looking at things. And I think if we don't have that culture in the church, I'm not surprised that everybody that leaves youth groups and goes to college, like 90% of them don't ever come back, because they don't have that culture built in. They don't have that mindset built in to do that. So,
and I think we have to leave room in our friendships to disagree and still have love and care. Now, there's things that, like, as a Jesus follower, we're probably, like, gonna have to agree on. Like, we're gonna have to agree that God came in the form of a man through Jesus, died on a cross, rose from the dead. Cool. All right. Now, do we have to agree that the flood was 100% literal the way that it is in the Bible? I don't think so. I think we can disagree on that and still hold the tenets of Jesus in. We can have good conviction and solid agreement there. So I think we have to allow room in our relationships to think differently and to have, like, we have to leave room for that, and we have to allow other people to come to different conclusions than we'd have.
Well, and there's reasons, I think, in church history, there are certain things that are closed-handed heresies and things that are secondary, open-handed issues.
Right.
That to leave those, even the early church said there's some things we need to discuss, but there's things we're not going to discuss. So, we've already talked about. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. I want to get into some of these questions because Instagram will cut us off in an hour. So I want to make sure we take time to answer some of these because there's certain ones of these that I think are really, really good. So let's go with one here. Do you think social media has changed the way Christians share the gospel?
I think social media, you know what? I was thinking about this the other day. I think I grew up getting told by my youth pastor that we all have influence. And I think social media has given us this idea that we now have influence, each of us. And now we're just out here, like, trying to build a platform and being like, well, from this platform, I don't know that it's changed. I think it's changed the way that we share the gospel, in that now we are taking social media and saying we're connected without actually having good, solid in-person friendships. And so the way that the gospel is shared in my friend circle and in my life is through those real relationships that I have outside of social media. And so I don't know that it's changed. I think social media has helped connect people as far as, like, actual, like, networking, maybe, or definitely given me a lot of opportunities to go different places and share. I'm very grateful for social media, but if it wasn't part of my job, I probably wouldn't use it. And I don't know, like, I don't know if that answers the question or not, but I think that there are people who have confused social media friendship in place of real friendship, and that is disheartening.
Yeah, and I appreciate your answer, because that's a totally different answer than most people give. But I think you're right, because, well, a lot of people say, because you can get so much more content out there. But I think you're right in the sense that, we can shotgun content out all the time. But is that content doing any good? Like, is your verse on your page actually doing what you think it's doing? Or is it one more thing for somebody else to scroll by while they're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram?
Sure. And I think that you can definitely use social media in a meaningful way. I mean, I hope that I am, I think we are right now with this conversation. But I think that, we're definitely just throwing stuff out there.
Hoping that somebody
but that doesn't have any context for, like,
I see a lot of it preaching to the choir, in the sense that the likes you get are the people that already
it's just
agree
getting
with
shared by other Christians. Right. I think that there's experience. Like, I don't know. I think you can read about communities of people who are unified by the love of God, and you can go, "Oh, that's really neat." Or you can experience a community of people who are unified by the love of God, and that can literally change your entire life. And so I think that social media has allowed us to only give glimpses. We also can tailor our image and can kind of go, we have a distance, and we can go, all right, this is the good, this is the highlights, this is whatever. While, being the worst person off social media. So, no one's going to care about that Bible verse in your bio if you're flipping people off in traffic all the time. Which, I mean, I've literally
seen on some of my youth groups,
before, so
youth groups profiles, it'll be a Bible verse, and then it'll be something underneath that's not even remotely interested or into Christianity. And you're going, I'm seeing some sort of there's a problem here.
I've seen profiles on Twitter where one is like, hey, that's when you know God loves you. And the next one, my safety settings don't let it show up. I'm like, what? How are those two things next to each other?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Pretty interesting.
All right. Let's go to another one. Let me see here what we got here. It's a good question. What is the quintessential interaction between Jesus and an unbeliever that you've seen in Scripture?
What is the question?
What's a good interaction between Jesus and an unbeliever that you've seen in Scripture that Christians can use to, as a great example of how to interact with unbelievers?
Oh, I mean, gosh, if we go to, you look at the story of the woman caught in adultery, or the way that Jesus interacts with lepers, and that these people are outcast and literally sent to a different space of their own to be with each other because they are just, and the way that Jesus is at dinner with, at the wedding, the place that he does his first miracle recorded is at a wedding where he makes more wine. And we see these things where I like that story where Jesus turns the water into wine because the people at the party didn't know he did that. He didn't bring jugs of water in front of all these people and go, behold, I am the Lord, and now it is wine. No, the people who got to experience that miracle, in a more tangible way, were the people who carried the buckets of water to the party.
Yeah.
And then he turned into wine, and all the guests at the party were just like, more wine. Cool.
Yeah.
And so I think that our role is less about hey, I just want you to know I'm serving you, and I hope that this is making your life better. We're going to pay your rent this month because we know you can't make it, but I hope you know that we're paying this because you need to follow Jesus now. And it's like, cool. And so, I don't know. I think especially the way he deals with lepers and the way that he just runs up to them, no fear. Where this group of people that everyone else is like, we're not even going to look at them. It's just dangerous.
And pursues them. Yeah, I mean, is deliberate in every interaction that he has, deliberately interacting and engaging
with isolated people.
Yeah.
And I think we're in a culture of church people who believe that this spirit of God we have in us, if we're Jesus followers, we now have to protect this. We're going to protect us from being tainted or contaminated. But Jesus lived as if that spirit was contagious, and so I hope that I can embody that as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a message the church needs to hear now. I mean, I'm surprised at how many times whenever I do preach out of the New Testament something Jesus is saying, and whenever it's juxtaposed between sinners and Pharisees, how often we have to, as church people, quote unquote, remind ourselves that we are far more like the Pharisees than we are like Jesus in many situations.
Oh my God.
It's mind-blowing that that's where we're at in our culture right now, that we have to go, oh my gosh, being really stupid right now.
I've been thinking about a lot lately is the prayer of the two guys in the temple, and one guy is praying, God, I am so sorry I'm broken and humbled before you. And the other guy is like, thank God I'm not like that guy,
Yeah.
And how it just seems like, especially social media comments, holy cow, dude.
No one's got a filter on social life.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying too, is that suddenly we understand our brokenness and we accept the forgiveness of Jesus, and now we're running around going, oh, thank God I'm not like that anymore. It's like, no, the thing about following Jesus is it starts with us going, oh, I am like that. That is me. I am that person, and I am in need of forgiveness and love, in the love of God. So it starts with that humility, and somehow we twist it to go, oh, I've earned this. And I think that comes from people who are like, oh, I'm going to live better, and I'm going to earn God's love, which is also just
and not understanding grace at all.
Cheapens it.
All right, let's go to one of these questions about your show. So could you give us, what is the worst and best shows you have ever done or experienced?
Oh, hold on, you froze on me. Are you there?
I said, what? Yeah. Hello? See me?
Ah! Oh, there we
me?
go. Okay.
Okay, man.
Yes. Worst and best show?
Yes, worst and best show.
Dude, best show was in June of this year for my friends at Ozark Christian College for this arts academy that it had. It was like 100 high schoolers, and they're all like, it's a cool arts academy where you go like on Monday they form different worship teams and all this stuff. And then on Friday, they do a showcase. So all week, they're like practicing as worship teams.
Mm-hmm.
They got video people who go into a different thing and make videos all week. There's only 100 people, and it was just awesome, dude. It was so fun. Like, I was supposed to be on stage for an hour, and I was up there for an hour and a half because we just kept
the
laughing
energy
and
kept going, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I wish I had, like, filmed that show. Because, like, we were literally, like, I was wheezing, laughing. Because we were just ad-libbing. We're going with it. We're having fun. People are falling out of their chairs. Like, oh, my gosh. That was one of those things that, like, and what's awesome about comedy, what's awesome and also awful, is that, like, every 6 weeks I want to quit. Because I really do. Like, every 6 weeks I wake up and I go, oh, I am not funny, you know? And so I was literally having one of those weeks. I was dreading that show. Because it's only 3 hours from my house. I knew it was only 100 high schoolers. And I was like, oh, man, like, this is going to be rough. And then that show happened, and it was electric. I don't know what happened, but it was, man, that was great.
Good.
So I think about that show a lot. The worst one, the worst one was I had a new management team, and they weren't a very good management team. This was like 2016. And I got booked at this, like, casino out in Oklahoma. And so I rent a car, I drive all the way down there, I get there, and my manager did not tell me that it was like a black tie event that I was like hosting.
Sort of important.
So I show up in a sweater and jeans, and I'm performing for the people who own this casino.
Oh my goodness.
And so and I'm contracted to do an hour. Like I'm supposed to be up there for an hour. And I was just up there like just eating it, like and it's like, it's so hard with comedy because it's one of those things that people are just like, oh yeah, go up there and make us laugh.
Well, yeah, it's going to click or not, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like music where it's like, I play country music, and if you don't like country music, it's going to be a rough show, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you're like a metalhead, you're not going to like this, you know? And so, so it was rough, man.
Did you make it through the whole hour?
No, dude. Well, because here's how the show works, right? So you have an hour of material, but that's really only about 45 minutes of talking with 15 minutes of room for laughter. So, so you're supposed to do like, you know, you tell a joke, you talk for like 15 seconds, they laugh for 10, you know, and then you talk for another 15, they laugh. But if no one's laughing,
we cut out all that laughing.
Oh, for like, you know, 45 minutes, I'm out of stuff to say. I'm like, all right, well. Whoo! But I got a free steak dinner, so that's all right.
Nice. Okay. All right. So one of the other questions here is, what Bible time would you visit if you had any Bible time you can go back to? Which one would you visit?
Bible time.
Yeah, I'm thinking apparently they want you to jump on the ark, or apparently they want you to, you know, go with Job. I don't know.
Oh, what time in the Bible?
Yeah,
like if I could go. Oh, interesting. Dude, I would be in the garden all day. All day. Yeah.
That's not going. You're going, no, don't eat that. Me? No, we're not eating that today.
Yeah. I'd be like, no. You don't know what you're about to do. I'm not doing this. I'm not. Man, I would. Because they were walking with God in the garden. That's super neat. That's what I like about God, is that what I've learned in the past few years is that God didn't put Adam and Eve in an already finished city, like in this paradise. He put them in a garden and said, you build it. And so, like, God wants to create and do humanity with us, like to build society and build an infrastructure and put a city together. Like, God wants to be a part of that and invites us to that. And so I think having God being a part of my comedy and my friendships and the community that I'm building in Kansas City has been so much more rewarding. And I would love to go to the garden and be a part of that. So Or the storm where Jesus is walking on water, just so I could see those guys' faces, like especially if I got to know what was going to happen, I'd be out there and be like, all
You're
right,
just chilling. They're like, what is wrong with you? You're like, no. I've read the book.
Dude,
I got it.
Because they're freaking out, man. They're like pouring water out of the boat. They're like, oh no. And you're like, all right, it's fine.
I'm chill.
I'm chill. See it.
Good deal.
Yeah, and also the boldness of Peter, who'd be like, all right, I'm going out there. You're like, okay, dude.
I need to see it. I need to see it, yeah. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left. So I want to end with two things. One, I like to give everybody that comes on like just 4 or 5 minutes. If you had a room full of people and this is the only time you could ever talk to them. This is the only time they will ever hear you speak. What's something you would say to that room full of people with that last 5 minutes you'll ever have with them?
Oh, man. Have fun. Quit living boring lives. I think that we can very easily fall into a routine. And there's nothing wrong with routine or structure. It's that when we rely on it and identify with it, then it becomes something that is redundant and boring. I think that obviously humans and the world function on routine, in that there are seasons and the time, like the sun sets. So obviously there's a natural cycle. My phone, my 20% battery thing came up. But to intentionally look around you, like let nature cycles and live in that cycle while also looking up from your routine. There's people who go to work and do the same thing, eat the same thing for lunch, come home, play the same game with their kids, go to bed, do it all again the next day. And I just really don't want to be that person. So look up, look for fun, because if you're looking for joy, you're going to find it. I look for fun in that I went to Starbucks last week and put, please use other door signs on both doors. And that's just dumb. And so, or you get like a large drink from a restaurant, like a Chick-fil-A cup, you tape it to the roof of your car, and it's empty, whatever, just tape it up there, just drive around, let people think you left your drink up there. Oh yeah, they're freaking out, dude. They're leaning out their cars. Like, there's just so much fun available to you, and I would hate to see people, and also that's to be, I don't want to be overly spiritual or whatever, but if you're just putting your headphones in and just getting your work done and doing the same thing every day, you do miss out on those opportunities for conversations with people that I've made some of my best friends sitting at Starbucks, like sitting next to somebody. I've seen they have in-ears in, which is something musicians use. And I just lean over and go, oh, what do you play? So if you just get out of your routine, it creates opportunity. That now, that guy I did that to, his name is Zach. We met in Kansas City Starbucks, and now he and his wife are some of my favorite people. We get Mexican food together. They're great, and that wouldn't have happened if I was, if I was just, doing the same old isolated thing all day.
That's great advice.
Your work is important, but it's not that important.
Yeah. Awesome. Good deal. Thank you. That's great advice. So here, before we get cut off, so how can people get a hold of you, book you, bring you to wherever, and pay you in burritos? Where can they do that?
That'd be awesome. On my website, jaronmyers.com. Right there, there's a booking tab. There's a videos tab. You can catch up on all our stuff. You can subscribe to my podcasts. You can email me. We make it very difficult, so you're going to write this down. It's jaron@jaronmyers.com. Very hard to get in touch with me. It's very difficult. But all of that's there. Book me, bring me to your city. I would love to do a show for you and your friends. Just let's hang out, and follow along. We're having so much fun. I do dumb stuff all the time, and I'm having a blast. And I'm really, really grateful this is my life. It's so fun.
I'd have to say, if you lived next to you or lived in the same building, I would say you'd have to constantly be looking out for some prank somewhere. I've seen some of the stuff you post that you're just like, man, if I lived next to you, I'd be like, I don't even know if that's serious. I don't even know anymore.
I am surprised I have not been evicted from my apartment yet. I don't know. They all know that I'm kidding. They like me. They get it. But man, we're having so much fun.
Some of the stuff you posted, like, if I was too tired, I'd be like, oh my gosh, not again, Jaron. But at the same time, it would be on that other side where you're like, thank God I have someone that has a sense of humor. that breaks that up a little bit. Yeah.
Well, they've started doing stuff back. It's really fun. Yeah, they started like stealing my packages and stuff, and you're like, oh, okay, all right, I get it. This is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, one guy keyed my car, and I was like, that's hilarious. He didn't. Like one guy threatened to stab me. You know,
it's just great. These relationships are very, very good. I like
Yeah, you should break out of the routine and make friends with strangers. They're totally safe.
They're totally great. I've only had 5 stitches. It was really good.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. All right, man. Well, thank you for hopping on. I appreciate it,
Yeah,
man. You